Good evening and welcome to another episode of Bear Dash. In the words of our good friend Joshua, let's go. Let's get this one underway. I'm here live with your other host, Shailin Singh, and we're here to talk all things Cal football. Quick announcement next week. Hopefully, we'll have our basketball segment on. We'll have some basketball beat reporters from the Daily Californian, where Shailin and I are both football beat writers, and we'll vary up our content a little bit now that Cal players are off the football field and will not be on the football field for a good deal of time. But this week, we're going to break down some roster changes, some transfers, some seniors staying put, and talk just a little bit about the CFP and college football in general. Zoom out a little bit now that the season is well and truly over, and Alabama is done taking names from literally everyone they lay eyes on. But first things first, Shailin, a lot of seniors announced that they were going to stay put. Who's bearing down for 2021, and what does that mean for the Bears?
Yeah, so we've been talking about this for last week and before break, just making our predictions of who's going to stay and who's going to go. And the overwhelming theme was that Cal had a lot of talented players, but not a lot of those players had their draft stocks where they wanted them to be. Obviously, Cam Bynum has been here forever. He's going to be a top 3-4 round pick. We knew he was going to go. He was going to go before the last season. He declared. We knew that. Beyond him, it was the other quality starters, guys like Cameron Good, Coin Dang, Elijah Hicks, Josh Drayden, Mike Safell, guys like that who were quality starters and in contention for all Pac-12 teams who we were debating whether they're going to stay or go. And all those guys I just listed decided to stay. Most of them made their announcements within the past week or so, and you can't even describe how much of a boost this is for Cal compared to if they were to not have those guys. Because going into 2021 now, Cal, again, like they were this season, is going to be one of the most experienced teams in the Pac-12. If my math is correct, defensively, Cal will have 9 of 11 starters returning with only Zionde Johnson and Cam Bynum gone. And offensively, they will also have 9 of 11 starters returning with only Makai Polk and Jake Curhan gone. So, I mean, unless obviously the starters can change with the depth chart and new additions to the team, but in terms of returning starters from 2020, Cal is going to be one of the most experienced teams in not only the Pac-12, but probably the country.
Yeah, there's no better way of putting it. I must say, though, I mean, you and I talked about this last week. I think we each anticipated that at least one of Cam Good and Coin Dang would be gone to the draft. We thought that was a foregone conclusion. Clearly, it wasn't. You can see they've been up on Twitter. I think the tagline right now is unfinished business. These guys are back because I think 2020 was just not the season they had hoped for. I mean, between COVID-19, the 3 losses, these Bears want to do a little more. They've said it. They're going to continue to say it. The goal is to make it to the Rose Bowl. The goal is to be one of the top teams in the Pac-12 North. And with that experience, I think they were picked to finish second in a preseason Pac-12 poll this year. I don't think that's really going to change because, like you said, this team isn't changing. But, Shailin, the question I want to volley back to you is, we said at least one of these guys was leaving for the draft. None of them did. Which one surprises you the most, and why?
For me, it was Cam Good because Coin Dang, we saw he had a bit slower of a start to the season than we anticipated, and I'm sure he anticipated. But Cam Good, I mean, he was a monster for all 4 of Cal's games and in 2019. So he put together the strong stretch of play. And, you know, it wasn't super surprising in the sense that he didn't get a lot of draft buzz and he wasn't really on mock drafts. He wasn't getting that national attention. But, you know, there are reasons for him to stay apart from just his draft buzz. I mean, he had some injury problems his first few years at Cal, so he should prove that he can stay healthy. And then, I mean, if he puts together yet another season of dominance against the run and can generate consistent pressure against quarterbacks, I mean, that's just going to boost his draft stock, I think, into the top five round picks if he puts together a season like he did in 2020. I mean, if he can do that for an entire 12-game season, that's going to bode really well for him. And for Dang, it was a little less surprising. Just like I said, he had a slow start, but he has a lot of priorities coming back. I mean, I think he can develop his body more. He can improve in pass coverage, specifically man coverage, we saw a couple, lapses where, not really lapses where he blew the coverage, but just like a step or two behind on multiple occasions. And then lastly, I think he can really improve on his block shedding. And a lot of that has to do with his weight and just getting stronger and more comfortable in his own body. He does have that pretty tall and lanky frame. So if he can learn to leverage that a bit more and be physical against the run, I think he can also boost his stock a ton.
I totally agree. I think all of these guys are going to benefit from having a longer season and a longer off season where they can really settle into their roles. I mean, Koin Dang is a guy who he was not recruited as an inside linebacker. He was an outside linebacker in community college. This is really a new position for him. And you can still see that at times. Like you said, I mean, just a step behind in man coverage, just getting beat by guys out of the backfield on passing plays. And he turned it around at the end of the season. 22 of his 31 tackles in 2020 came in the last 2 games. He also had 2.5 tackles for a loss, half a sack, and 2 forced fumbles. I mean, he was really getting into the groove. But a full offseason and a full 12 games are going to allow him to show that he's a very versatile player and that maybe he's remedied some of those areas for improvement. I think the other guy to look out for, and where it's really not surprising, is Elijah Hicks. He's been with this program for a while, but he was just moved to safety. And he did have a pick this year, but I think you and I have also talked about it. He looked, I mean, sort of off at times. Like he hadn't quite adjusted to what the safety position meant. I think he got beat on a huge run against Jamar Jefferson against Oregon State, where he was really the last man. And that's just one play, but it was that kind of thing. Like he was just slightly out of position, and a full offseason and the full season are really going to help him. I do want to touch on Cam Good, though. I mean, in my opinion, the guy should be a day 2 pick. I mean, it's absurd how little draft buzz he gets. And you think about this season, he had 8 tackles for a loss. He was averaging 2 a game. That's higher than anyone who ESPN ranked above him on their draft board, which is a sizable amount of players. Over the last 16 games, over the last 2 seasons, he's had 22 tackles for a loss and 12.5 sacks. I mean, those are absurdly good numbers, and he's been consistent now for just about 2 years. He hasn't been injured. He's been healthy. He has made plays. He's been in the thick of it. And it is ridiculous to me that, I mean, he is not a guy who's going in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, I think he really can improve on that stock, and I think he will, especially I think a lot of that will have to do with Cal's success in the win-loss column next year. I mean, you see teams like LSU last year who, yeah, they won a national championship and went undefeated, but they had a ton of guys who probably wouldn't have gotten drafted or wouldn't have gotten looks on NFL teams get those looks because of just how successful they were as a team. So if Cal can string together a strong season next year, I think that'll boost Cam Good and Koin Dang and all these guys' draft stocks a lot more. One guy I want to touch on that we haven't really mentioned that much yet is Josh Drayden coming back. I mean, that's a huge boost to Cal's secondary. And with Hicks, this is, again, a very, very experienced secondary. And Drayden showed his ability to also play outside. He's normally just a nickel cornerback, but he moved outside a lot this past season, and it'll be interesting to see where they put him next season. I know you maybe hinted at the possibility of Hicks moving back to cornerback, and we can talk about that possibility again in the next segment because Cal is going to be receiving a transfer at the safety position. But I mean, this secondary is now very, very talented and experienced compared to what they would have been had Hicks and Drayden left. But I want to ask you about the offensive side of the ball because Mike Safell, the center, is one of the most important positions in football. He's coming back. And then also Marcel Dancy, who we just found out a few minutes ago, is also coming back. And he spent some time as Cal's lead back. I mean, Damian Moore was the lead back, but there were stretches where Dancy was getting a lot of carries and he was making the most of it.
Yeah, I mean, Marcel Dancy really adds a dimension to this running attack that no other back that at least we've seen the last couple of seasons from Cal has been able to do. I mean, you think about guys like Damian Moore, Christopher Brown Jr. They're really they're different types of guys, but they're really hard runners. I mean, they're going to get in your face. They're going to be physical. They're going to get downfield. Dancy is not that dude. He's much more shifty. He's elusive. He's tough to catch. And it's a different kind of threat. And I think we talked about this during the season. When you have that kind of variability in your backfield, it makes it really hard to plan for as a defense. I mean, these are three different backs who could each on their day go for over 100 yards in a game. And I mean, how do you plan for that? How are you aware of that? It's something else the defense has to be aware of, has to be thinking about, has to be looking for and looking at. And so having Dancy there is just extremely reassuring. I mean, he is. I mean, like you said, he's a borderline RB1, and because you have guys like Christopher Brown Jr. and Damian Moore in there, he sort of falls down the pecking order. But he's an integral piece, and I mean, often what you'll see with this team is when they can't get one back going, they get someone else going. And Dancy is just another guy who can go out there, get you 75, 100 yards on the ground, be a threat in the passing game, be tough to catch, and give guys like Brown Jr. and Moore some rest, which is going to be critical. Safell is, I think, maybe the most underrated player on Cal's offense. He's been there forever. He has loads of experience. And he's a guy you can tell just talking to him. He's fun to be around. He makes the game fun. He sort of brings you in. I mean, you can talk to any reporter. You can watch any interview of him. Safell is just having fun, and having him around is, I think, going to make the season that much better for the Bears. But he's also extremely talented. He's a leader on offense. He always has been. He works well with Garbers, and that just bodes well. He's the linchpin of that offensive line. He's really the leader out there, and it's going to be hard to go wrong if Safell can stay on the field for a meaningful amount of time his senior year.
Absolutely. It's amazing to have all these guys back. I don't think we could have predicted this many players coming back, even with all these circumstances. But even with all those fantastic players coming back, Cal did take a major hit that I don't think either of us saw coming. Mekhi Polk, standout wide receiver for Cal, up and coming, a young kid, transferred to Mississippi State. What do you think happened there?
It's tough to know. We haven't really been able to reach him for comment. And you got to understand, transfers are always like personal decisions, right? There's always sort of more than meets the eye. I think from a football standpoint, he's going to go to an offense that's run by Mike Leach. Everyone's sort of the air raid. Mike Leach is a pass-happy guy. He loves to go through the air. I mean, you look at what Nick Rolovich was able to do at Washington State and how well their receivers performed this season. I mean, you had guys putting up insane numbers, and that's not like a true air raid offense. Mike Leach is really that guy when it comes to just throwing the ball. He throws the ball almost every play. If you're Mekhi Polk, you're going to put up insane numbers at Mississippi State. I mean, as a Bulldog, you're gonna have a lot of numbers. You're gonna have a great opportunity to grow as a player, and I mean that's gonna look good if your goal is to get drafted. But this really hurts the Bears. Not a death blow. I think not as bad as it looks initially on paper. But I mean, Shailin, you talk more about like who Mekhi is and what the Bears will be missing.
Yeah, I mean, he was really Cal's kind of most explosive receiver. Like when you needed a big play, you looked to Mekhi Polk. And the numbers, like you said, don't jump off the board. He had 17 catches for 183 yards in 4 games this season. But, I mean, he was Chase Garbers' option when he wanted to go deep because Kiko Crawford can do that. Remigio can do that, but neither of them have that top-end speed that Mekhi Polk has. And that's going to be severely missed next season. But I don't think the hit in terms of depth is too terrible because of the two standout recruits Cal has coming in, JaMychal Sturdivant and Maven Anderson, two 4-star recruits who were probably going to have taken some of Polk's reps anyways, just because of how talented they were. So I don't know if that had to factor into the decision or not, why he left. But I mean, those are two really talented players who are more outside receivers, and they can kind of take on that role. They don't have the speed that Polk has, but they make up for it in other departments where they're extremely talented. But I agree. It was just extremely surprising because he was still so young, and he's a local kid from El Cerrito. Like Cal recruits a lot of those guys, and they usually don't lose a lot of them. But you're right. I mean, this going to Mississippi State under Mike Leach is a huge opportunity for him. Cal's quarterbacks and wide receivers under Coach Wilcox have never put up big numbers, not even average. Like Cal's passing offense has been well below average in every year of the Wilcox era. And I mean, who knows? We hope that'll change under a full offseason and season of Bill Musgrave. But Mekhi Polk is going to pretty much the most guaranteed place where he's going to get targets and he's going to get catches. And apparently Mississippi State wants him to come in and lead the wide receiver room. I don't know if that was just a sales pitch to get him to commit or if he's actually going to emerge as a top target for Mississippi State, but nonetheless, it's a huge opportunity for him, and he's going to probably be a lot more involved there than he would have been at Cal.
Yeah, and it's just in terms of opportunities to catch the ball, like you said. The other thing I think that Cal fans are going to miss is Polk was really starting to develop into a more dynamic threat. I mean, you talk to him, his MO the last couple of seasons has been that sort of vertical threat, that downfield ability to just burn anyone on the sidelines and get the ball. But he was transforming. He'd added weight, he'd added muscle. I mean, running different kinds of routes, getting into the center of the field, being a target in different kinds of ways. And I mean, Cal's going to miss that. Like, he was the type of receiver, and he had the type of potential, more critically, that guys like Remigio and Crawford just don't. Like you said, though, Maven Anderson, J. Michael Sturdivant, they're going to come in, and I think that's the reason Cal fans shouldn't be worried, because those guys are going to set Memorial Stadium on fire.
Yeah. So Polk is gone. Those receivers are coming in. Cal also had another super strong addition in Raymond Woody III, who was just finished his true sophomore season with Florida State as a recruit. He was heavily recruited by Cal, but ended up picking Florida State. I think his dad coached there for the linebackers, but he was recruited just about everywhere. He had offers from Alabama, Oregon, UGA, Florida, Oklahoma, but he chose FSU, appeared in 10 games as a true freshman. He started 2 games this past season, finished the year with 25 tackles. He's still very young and has loads of potential. So, I mean, that's a huge get for Cal. What do you see on paper about him?
Yeah, I mean, this is another great get because of the way the season was structured, the NCAA's rules around eligibility. He actually has 3 years he can play with Cal. Whether he takes all of those is entirely up to him. But, I mean, he said after his dad, his father was coaching at Florida State. He no longer is. He's moved to Florida Atlantic along with former Seminole head coach Willie Taggart. He said that didn't have any bearing on his desire to transfer. Whether it did or not is something only he knows. But I think he's a really talented playmaker that Cal's adding. He's got a ton of experience, not a ton of starts, but he's a guy who's get outs there. He makes tackles. He's also a good pass rusher. You can sort of add in that department. It's just more experience that Cal can add to its defensive backs unit. I mean, if you're Raymond Wood, you're looking at a defensive backs group that had 2 safeties drafted last season. Bynum's going to get drafted this season. The Takers have consistently been one of the best defensive backs units in the sport. And I mean, that's somewhere you want to be. I think the other great thing is we've talked about sort of Hicks and Drayden staying around. There's a museum. Daniel Scott very quietly had a good season. It does seem like there's a lot of talented guys there, but Cal, like you said before, they like to get tricky with how they use their defensive backs. They don't like really hard set position guys. And if you want to get up there, you're trying to improve your draft stock by showing your versatility. Cal is the place to be because they're going to put you in different positions. They're going to give you different roles. They're going to try to make it complicated, and you're going to learn a lot. And you're going to get minutes. You're going to get an opportunity to get out there and make plays. And I mean that has to be appealing.
Yeah, and you talked about the 2 Cal safeties drafted last year, Jalen Hawkins and Ashton Davis. I was reading on his Woody's 247 bio, and I want to read you these descriptors of him. And to me, this just sounds exactly like Ashton Davis, how you would have described Ashton Davis as a player or as a recruit. This is how they describe Woody: elite top end speed, strong in the open field, aggressive style, not afraid to deliver big hits, but could improve with block shedding and physicality. Like, those were all of Ashton Davis's pretty much exact like pros and cons heading into the NFL draft. Like, someone who can fly and is not afraid to hit, but they could work on their against the run and getting off blocks and things like that. I mean, I haven't really seen much of his film. I don't know if that they play similarly like based on the eye test, but based on that description, it sounds like he could fill in as a free safety pretty well for Cal.
Yeah, and speed is something the Bears have always needed. I think we're seeing this start to change, but in the first couple of years of the Wilcox era, this wasn't a coaching staff or a team really that could recruit highly. And what I mean is, like, you think about guys like Woody, who was heavily recruited by Cal but did not choose Cal. A lot of guys who, I mean, had those physical tools, had the size and the speed, were not choosing the Bears. And it meant the Bears were able to find some really talented guys like Bynum, like Hicks, like Davis, like Hawkins, and develop them. They found smart guys, they found passionate guys, and those guys made a difference. But there's still a lot of dudes, and we talked about like Coin Dang needing to work on this, and Bynum has talked about this in a lot of interviews, needing to work on their speed and those physical tools. Woody is a guy that comes in with a lot of that, and that's a different kind of player than the Bears are sort of usually fielding, and that helps a lot. I mean, speed is always going to make a difference in a football game.
Definitely. And just to touch on a couple last transfers, Drew Schlegel, Cal's starting fullback, entered the transfer portal. Not too sure why he transferred. Maybe he's trying to go to a specific program academically, or who knows. I mean, he was involved in the offense, but fullbacks are never really that involved in the offense. So maybe he was just looking for a different opportunity. Another guy, Jeremiah Hawkins, he was a fast, deep threat for the Bears, but he battled drops and injuries throughout his entire Cal career, and he wasn't going to be any higher than number 5 or 6 on the receiver depth chart next season. So that's not a huge loss. And then lastly, PJ Potosi, an offensive lineman, he also announced his transfer. He also barely played, and Cal has a lot of offensive lineman depth, thankfully, heading into next season. So best of luck to all those guys. And hopefully Cal can reel in a couple more transfers because, I mean, if they're anything like Woody, they could come in and be immediate contributors.
Yeah. One other guy, I think running back Deshaun Collins has entered the transfer portal.
Yeah.
That's a loss that hurts. I think Bears will remember him. He had a couple good games in 2019. But again, that Cal running backs unit is completely stacked.
Absolutely. If you could have like one immediate starter transfer come in, what position would you want heading into 2021? Because for me, it's got to be somewhere on the defensive line. I mean, it's a pretty thin position and a lot of young players, still a lot of talent there. But I think if Cal could reel in an experienced defensive end or nose guard, that would help them out a lot.
I absolutely agree. It's the one position I think with Deontay Johnson declaring for the draft that the Bears are really just going to be short in. I mean, we saw it hurt them this year. They gave up over 200 rushing yards in their first 2 games. They were struggling with the COVID-19 outbreak and the quarantine and contact tracing protocols involved. And it just really hurt the team as a whole. We've said they now have a very deep and experienced defensive backs unit. Mwelu Iosefa emerged as a really solid inside linebacker option for both the present and the future. He's just a freshman. And then I think we had guys like J.H. Tevis now with Cam Goodback. That outside linebacker position is extremely scary if I'm in an opposing offense. The Bears, like you said, have 9 of 11 starters returning on offense. They have a very experienced offensive line that's also very deep. Tons of running backs, new recruits at tight end, at wide receiver. Garbers is the go-to guy under center. But defensive line is the one position where they're short.
Definitely. And then to move on to our final topic, a little less Cal specific, we're going with the widely debated topic every single year, no matter what college team you're a fan of. Should the college football playoff be expanded to more than 4 teams? There's a lot of possibilities. Some say 6, some say 8, some say 12. What say you, Jasper?
Look, I said a lot of things at the beginning of the season about Cal and its potential this year. And as my fellow Dash Sports hosts will remind me across our programs, I was not quite correct there. Cal did not, in fact, make the CFP. If you were paying attention, Cal was not playing in the national championship game. That was Ohio State and Alabama. I did say that wouldn't surprise me, and it didn't. I was not quite ready for how poorly the Bears would do, but hey, it is what it is, right? You can't get them right every time. But expanding the college football playoff, and a lot of people have talked about what this would mean, I think it's inherently a good thing. It's going to give more teams opportunities to make it. I think that there are pathways for teams like Cal. We saw Washington State a couple of years ago, Minnesota in 2019. There are pathways for those sort of smaller tier programs to make that jump and to put on a run. But it's just hard when there's only 4 teams that get in. And I think another aspect of this, and you saw it this year, is that there's really a lot of inherent biases within the committee for certain teams. You think about Cincinnati, who played well and showed against Georgia that they were capable of taking on top Power 5 teams, and I don't think they got a second look. I mean, Texas A&M obviously got left out, but they're a big Power 5 team. But like in exchange for a team like Ohio State and Notre Dame, who just have that pedigree, who have that blue blood. I mean, Alabama is always going to get a second look that teams like Coastal and Carolina and Cincinnati aren't, and teams like Cal won't. And so I think expanding the college football playoff and giving some smaller tier teams, or lower tier teams, I'm sorry, chances to make postseason runs will be good not only for their opportunities to win national championships, but for those programs to get that publicity, to get that recruiting, to get that money. Those are all good things, and they help out those programs. And that's why I think it's a home run move.
Would you support a playoff where it's a little bit more rigid in how it's structured, such as a lot of people are saying, if it's 6 teams, the 5 Power 5 conference champions get in, and then the 6th team is the top non-Power 5 school, and then for an 8-team playoff, it would be the 5 Power 5 champs, the top non-Power 5 school, and then 2 at-large bids, which can be anyone. Do you think those are the right way to go, or just sticking with the CFP playoff committee's like opinionated rankings where they just take the top 6 or 8 teams based on what they think?
Yeah, I mean, I just went on a whole rant against the biases of the committee, so that should give you an indication of where I stand. I do like the idea of conference champions making it. That being said, I mean, there's obviously a lot of potential for chaos there, a lot of potential for, I don't know, like a 4 or 5 loss team sneaking in. One thing I've seen proposed, I think, is that the conference champions get an automatic bid provided they have a certain ranking. They're above a certain threshold, be that in the top 10, top 15, then those teams will get in. I mean, obviously, provided they've performed well throughout the regular season. I like the idea of at-large bids, so I think my preferred choice would be an 8-team playoff where you do have those opportunities for at-large bids. I will say a lot of people's counter-argument to that is that you'll get a poor regular season team that can qualify, that you're maybe not getting the quote-unquote best teams. I don't think it's actually about the quote-unquote best team. We're not trying to quantify the best team. The playoff in its very sort of the way it's structured isn't going to get you the best team. It's going to get you the luckiest team, the team that gets hot at the right time. I mean, these aren't complaints we make about basketball where we have a 68 team format. I mean, I don't think the best team wins every year in March Madness. No one's complaining. If you want the best team to win, do it like European football and just have a regular season. But that's not how we roll. We want to play off because it's exciting, because it's entertaining. And if you want to do that, you got to love some Cinderella stories. And that's something college football does not have right now. So expanding the playoff and, yeah, giving those Power 5 champions a shot and giving those group of 5 champions a shot, it's going to make it more entertaining.
Yeah, I do think you have to strike the right balance between making the playoffs the center of the season and super exciting, and also the regular season, because I think part of what makes college football so special is that the regular season is so important and that every single game matters, especially in those really competitive conferences like the SEC, where it seems to be there's like a few contenders each year who duke it out during the regular season. And those rivalry games, they're always going to be fun no matter how many teams the playoff is. But if you can give those games and the non-rivalry games a playoff feel because those games matter so much, I think that's also beneficial. So you have to look at both sides of it. I do agree with expanding it. I would be fine with 6 or 8 teams. I prefer 8 teams because of the at-large bids. I don't think I like the structure where the 5 champions make it in and then only 1 extra team, because I think that would also leave out some qualified and talented teams. But I mean, I'm all for expanding the playoff. It would make the bowl games a little weird. You would have to figure out, what happens with the New York Six bowls, and that can all be sorted out. But either way, I think it's better for all of college football if they were to move to 6 or 8 teams in the playoff. We could talk about this all day. We're pretty much out of time, but I mean, I'm sure this is an argument that will be happening a lot this season, all throughout college football. And I don't know if we're going to see a change heading into 2021, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, one final point. I think if you're expanding the playoff, you do have to think about decreasing the amount of regular season games just because of injuries, potential to get hurt, potential to miss time. Like you said, I mean, those would make regular season games more entertaining. But if you're adding postseason games, you do need to dial it back in. I don't think it's truly acceptable to have guys playing 15 or 16 game seasons for 3 years before they turn pro. I think you do need to give people an opportunity to play a little less. If you're going to expand the postseason, shrink the regular season, that doesn't devalue the regular season. In fact, I think that makes each game more meaningful, each loss that much more brutal. It makes the opportunity for sort of smaller programs to go on big runs that much more intense. But that I think is one more thing to think about, just the amount of games guys are playing. But like Shailin said, we are running low on time. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us. Next week, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we should get some Cal basketball here for you. It's been exciting. The Bears are slowly improving. I believe it's going to be a long Pac-12 season, folks. But the Bears have one and two exciting things to look out for, and our basketball beat writers know much more about it than I do. So I'm going to stop talking. For now, though, thanks for being with us. In the words of our good friend Justice de los Santos, stay hydrated. Have a good time out there, and that's all, folks.